something very exciting for nerds like me, the Apple Vision Pro. Now, you said virtual reality headset. Don't you dare call it that.
So sorry.
It is a spatial computing device, okay? The press guidelines say do not call it a virtual reality headset. And the commentary for the most part is that this is the best thing in this category. There's others who are describing it as a prophylactic against procreation, but hey, listen, there's going to be some haters out there.
Woof. Hello and welcome to The Big Con, the podcast dedicated to demystifying and simplifying the world of strategy, exploring its impact on businesses and individuals who've either harnessed for success or perhaps missed the mark. I'm Emily, Harvard degree candidate.
And I continue to be a very tired Dale, big business nerd and self-proclaimed content aficionado.
And we are bringing you in on the con, sharing the valuable lessons from both the failures and triumphs of those who've come before us. So, Dale, tell me what we have today.
Today we're going to be looking at another multi-trillion-dollar company. Now, there's a finite amount of $2-3 trillion companies on the market. So there's Microsoft and there's recently Nvidia, which I'll take full credit for. But today we're talking Apple. I won't describe Apple in great detail. Most of our listeners will be aware of iPhones, of Macs, of iTunes, stuff all that, because I want to delve into one of their newest products, something very exciting, exciting for nerds like me, the Apple Vision Pro. Emily, are you aware of the Apple Vision Pro?
I feel like I've heard the name. Is it something like virtual reality something?
Yeah, it is. And you're like, oh, I feel like I've heard of it. Just shows where you might be on a little framework I'm going to introduce later on.
Yeah.
Apple's spatial computing headset retails at about $6,000. Pretty expensive. And for the most part, It's a pair of goggles. You strap them on your head and it allows you to overlay various apps and movies and whatever in the real world. It's described as a bit of a glimpse of the future. And any demo of this device is what we see in movies. It's right up there with flying cars. Now, you said virtual reality headset. Now, don't you dare call it that. It is a spatial computing device, okay?
So sorry.
The press guidelines say do not call it a virtual reality headset. And the commentary for the most part, best thing in terms of those type of devices, which may or may not be virtual reality devices. There's others who are describing it as a prophylactic against procreation, but hey, listen, there's going to be some haters out there. Many people question the relatively high price tag, even for an Apple product, while some question the overall purpose, like who actually needs this? Did anyone ask for this? Regardless, it's here. And there is already 200,000 units on estimate that have been sold. And I don't think it'll be the last of its kind. So I actually want to dive into the strategy of this as a device. Apple. For over a decade, or the better part of a decade, Apple has kind of been accused of not really innovating that much, becoming a bit stagnant. They released the iPhone and everyone's like, okay, what have you done since then? And all they've been doing, from what it might look like as every year, every press release where a new iPhone comes out, a new iPad comes out, it looks like minor iterative, albeit best in class, updates to their main line of products, which is the Mac and the iPhone.
My favorite is the AirPods where you have a connector so you don't lose them, which is just really old headphones with like wired headphones. That's my favorite, I think.
Yeah, I know, but it costs more. So you got to think about that. The difference there is price. And AirPods are a massive part of their business. But so much of what they've been doing in all these products is actually built towards the Apple Vision Pro. They famously, a few years ago, they dumped Intel, who was making all the brains of their Macs. So they dumped them and got rid of them, the primary chip partner for their Macs. And they invest in their own infrastructure. An absolute powerhouse, a thing called an M chip. And they also had the A chip, which is in the iPhones already. So they kind of built it already because they realized that they needed something that Intel wasn't going to be able to provide them. So they're like, let's build it up internally. They've also internally built up things like software skills, frameworks, and a whole bunch of patents that work brilliantly for their existing devices. So they're things that look awesome on your iPhone and work well on an iPhone and give value back to the customer. Things like Face ID, all the photos that we take on iPhones look so good, all the image processing from the hardware and the software, that's really important. They've got this thing called AR kit. They've got a thing called spatial audio, which is where you tilt your head and you're wearing headphones and it sounds like the sound's coming from a certain way. So they've got all these tools and technologies that suddenly find itself right at home in the device that's built entirely around it. Again, the Apple Vision Pro. All roads and innovations have, in theory, been leading to this device. Apple comes out with this product. They're seen as a genius of innovation again. And some commentators say at this point, Apple kind of had to weigh into this market. Our interaction with computing would go this way. or some version of it. It was either going to go
Mm.
down the AI path, which Apple's been famously late to, but they knew that computing was going to change. It wasn't always going to be keyboard and mouse. And so, how was one of the biggest computer companies in the world going to react to this?
Mm.
But the price, that's something that's a big sticking point. And I think I've got multiple points on this as to why it is so expensive.
Okay.
Point one, it's how this device is being pitched. So many of the actual practical examples or applications of this device are all in this work based environment. And sure, there's plenty of promo videos of people sitting alone in apartments watching James Cameron's Avatar or the latest Avengers film. Still, again, I feel like even though these people are watching, doing a leisure activity, the people in these are looking like professionals. They're in some immaculate house. You know that they've just come home from a busy day at the office or just got off a
Mm.
plane and they're strapping this on for some quiet time. And for the most part, I feel like Apple Vision Pro has been pitched as a bit of an enterprise solution. You no longer need to buy a computer screen. You can now buy this headset and have one incredibly high quality screens that Apple's also known as right on your face.
God, I would hate to show up to work one day and they're like, anyway, you now live in this headset. I'd be like, hey, claustrophobia, bye.
Yeah. Which is some of the arguments around it being prophylactic. And it comes with all the other features. Designers can all of a sudden be right up against their images, and they can look at their Photoshop documents and they can drill into the details and do minority report actions and wave their arms around. Business people can beam into digital representations of themselves to important meetings worldwide. One of the most brilliant advertising campaigns was a very important looking man. He sticks on his headset and he's transported away from seat 17A with no legroom, you're right, and the screaming kids to an oasis of his choosing. He can pick whatever he wants. He can go to Yosemite if he wants. So, when it's an enterprise solution, you can slap a premium on the price, which is probably a little bit of the goal for Apple. And it's not the first time that this has
Mm.
actually been tried in this product category. Facebook's Meta did it with the Oculus Pro, and Microsoft had their recently retired holodeck as well. But I feel like the actual goal is so much more brilliant. And it comes from the point that the technology at the moment is just not good enough. Sure, it's a really cool device and a look at the future. It is on paper, in many scenarios, the best device in its category overall. There's nothing else to beat it right now,
Mm.
despite what the Zuck may say. But things that the future doesn't advertise is that this headset is really cumbersome, that you need a big pack that comes out of your head that you have to carry around in your pocket. It's a unit that you kind of strap to yourself, and that it only really lasts for about 2 hours. And also, Netflix and YouTube don't even have apps on it yet, so it's not really that great in terms of market appeal. As a user, what you see in the headset is filmed by multiple cameras and projected back at you. And as of right now, our eyes are actually still far better at rendering images than what screens and cameras can give back to us. You're just pretty much watching TV on a headset,
Mm.
like a virtual reality headset. So there's plenty of funky things about this device that could actually be considered deal breakers, particularly for the masses. And your comment around going to work and being said, hey, this is your new headset that you need to strap into, not great. Particularly when you think about Apple, who is a company that's known for it just works. This one, it just works kinda.
Yeah.
So, Em, who do you think Apple is pitching a device like this to in their marketing right now?
So I would hazard a guess that potentially they're looking at history in terms of technology to build their case around this item. So, for example, computers. When we first built computers, they were so big and so expensive that literally like only NASA used them. As technology progressed and we became better at making them and we started to see what people might use them for and other uses kept popping up around the place and we got faster, smaller microchips, thanks Nvidia, blah blah blah. Computers became a household thing. My guess would be that perhaps Apple is trying to run that same gauntlet, which is get it into industry at this expensive price while we can't make it for the generic consumer right now. And then we will start to innovate. Those companies who may use it may start to innovate it in ways that we didn't anticipate or see. And then we jump on that train in that way. And then all of a sudden they're a household item and everyone has one and they're an AirPod. That's my thought.
I mean, you're pretty close. But I think I need to introduce something called the diffusion of innovations theory. Strap in, kids, it's time for a lesson. Coined by Everett Rogers in 1962. This more or less explains this phenomenon and what I feel like they're pitching. And it's explains how technology kind of spreads through cultures and into the zeitgeist. First, you have a group called the innovators. They make up about 2.5% of the population. Those willing to take risks. They're usually young, they have money to burn, and a high risk tolerance. It means they might adopt things that, for the most part, they could fail. They're happy to take a risk on software, on tools, or a movement that's a bit funky if it's more future facing. These are the weirdos who are talking about Bitcoin in like 2009, or those who
Mhm.
embrace new fashions or diets very early.
So it's you.
Incorrect. Because the next up is where I think I belong. We have the early adopters, 13% of the population, deemed as thought leaders, share many of the traits of the innovators, but are known to rely on their own intuition to make choices to adopt new technology. So slightly more risk adverse and don't really use all the evidence. They go, ooh, I wonder if this will work well or not for me.
Mm.
But these guys are more role models and influencers for the next few groups. The next group, it's the early majority. And if you're a business, this is what you want. If you're a business innovating in technology or products or something, this is the market you want to capture because it's 34%. They're seen as the early adopters. They understand the success and they want to share, so they kind of wade into the pool.
Mm.
Then we have the late majority, a further 34%. These are the ones who are a bit skeptical and only dared look into the new technology when they're
Me.
definitely proven and needed. They're still a bit risk adverse and very much downstream of the influence of the other categories. And finally, we have the laggards, 16% of the population, and the least likely to adopt some new innovation. Known to have an aversion to change, they're often a little more senior in age and very focused on traditions rather than what's new. So, Em, you
Mhm.
think you're a late majority?
Yeah, for sure. I'll only adopt technology if I'm absolutely forced to, or you tell me about it.
I would agree. I would agree.
Yeah.
I feel like,
Well, just having known me for 10 years, you're like, "Yeah, that seems
yeah,
rad."
yeah, fair enough.
And I'm always like, "How do I use this new thing, Dale?"
Which that's fair. And while I appreciate you recognizing that I may be an innovator, I disagree. I feel like I'm still close to an early adopter.
I also would argue that it would depend
Correct.
on the scenario.
Correct.
Yeah. In my industry of research, I'm a first mover. So, it just depends what crowd I'm in,
Got to
really.
hang out the retirement home a little bit longer. And I think for me, I would love to be an innovator, but as I mentioned beforehand, I'm a little bit more of a realist and a little bit. I still have some of that risk adverse kind of mentality. And the line that stood out to me when I was researching this is that I use my own intuition. And so there's times when I won't look at the brochure and be like, yeah, sure, I can do 10% this and 5% this, but I'm like, yeah, but will it work for me? The Apple Vision Pro is targeted at that innovator segment. It's a multi-trillion-dollar company trying to find product market fit, and perhaps maybe a few of the early adopters. And it seems crazy at what must be an incredible cost to the company. But as you mentioned, this isn't a product they're trying to sell to the masses. The product that they want to sell is the next one, or the one after that. The version of the Apple Vision Pro, which is cheaper, more lightweight, has more apps.
Mm,
All these innovators have been toiling away to bring more experiences to it and probably drop the Pro name from it and make it just the Apple Vision, most likely cheaper.
mm,
And so
mm.
all of a sudden it's not a cumbersome headset. It's just a pair of glasses we're putting on, and you get the same features without the bugs.
I can't imagine what it would be like to pick up the iPhone 1 right now.
Correct.
It would be just totally, we'd be like, this is a piece of crap. And at the time, we were like, this is the greatest thing man has ever created. So it's like, it's all perspective, I suppose. But, like I said, same with the computer journey. I think it's an interesting tactic to take.
To use the iPhone analogy, I think for everyone who might remember, if they had it was a beer app on your iPhone where it would simulate a beer
Oh,
glass. And if you tilted it left and right, it would be like, oh, wow, that's liquid. That's where we're at on the Apple Vision Pro journey right now. We're
yeah.
in beer glass time. So just think about the innovation that's going to come. Do you want some evidence as to how I've reached this genius conclusion?
Sure.
It's the Apple playbook. They do it again
Yeah.
and again when they introduce a new product. They bring it onto the market. It's a device that disrupts an entire category. The greater masses laugh at it and go, what are they thinking? This will never last. It appears to iterate on something existing, but stands out uniquely and generally better in a few discrete ways. AirPods, the Apple
Hmm.
headphones. They were famously described as ear tampons at one point. Since they are now market leading in their category, they are now worth, as a product alone, $365 billion. Imagine having one product in your vertical just worth $365 billion. That's not too
And they're
bad.
like they're on the
Just
cheaper
headphones.
end of their products too, aren't they?
Yeah, still pricey, but
What are
in
they? A
terms of what
couple
you're
of
getting
hundred
for it,
bucks though?
all right, money bags, calm down.
Is that isn't
Uh,
it isn't it like versus like $3,000 for a laptop or
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah, yeah. For an Apple product, they are on the small side.
That's
But in terms of
that's what I mean.
headphones, in terms of headphones, they're still a premium.
I know, I don't own them because of that.
The Apple Watch? How absurd, they said. A watch that barely lasts a day, then bang! The features and the integration with the Apple ecosystem have it accounting for 34.1% of all smartwatch shipments in
I
2022.
blame you for my Apple Watch that's sitting in a drawer somewhere.
And there was 100 million Apple Watch users in 2020, and that number has surely only grown. The iPhone, Steve Jobs, 2007, he gets on stage and he shows this weird looking device with only one single button. The Microsoft CEO at the time, who was backing BlackBerry, is famously interviewed saying, "A phone without a keyboard, good luck, Apple," or something to that effect. And we all know how that goes, with over 230 million iPhones sold yearly. A design that, to be honest, most manufacturers have ended up copying, albeit
Mm.
Apple's probably borrowed something from other manufacturers too. And it's recently taken the crown as the most purchased smartphone. Main reason why is that younger audience coming through. Now, Em, let's take a break because I have a gift for our listeners on our return, and I think you'll have something to add to my incredibly generous offer. Emily, welcome back. Now, as I promised, today I'm providing a gift to our audience. I'm offering 3 takeaways from a 2-ish, 3-ish trillion dollar company that the average Joe, Jane, or Jeffrey could take away with them and apply in their everyday. Now, whether this is for small business owners or your 9 to 5 job, so that's maybe who you are. This is not always for entrepreneurs, or part of our growing audience of Fortune 500 CEOs with some imposter syndrome who need some fresh ideas. Our numbers suggest you may be out there, or they don't suggest you're not out there anyway. So if you fall into any of these categories and you've just stumbled upon us, make sure you're giving us a quick follow or subscribe. It only takes 2 seconds from you, but it means so much to us. So Em, as I present these ideas, I want your thoughts, and I want you to consider any bonus gifts we might learn from the Apple product approach, because there is some out
Great.
there.
Yeah.
Takeaway 1. Adopt a continuous learning mindset. Don't stand still, everyone. Listen to your customers, to your stakeholders, to those you're working with. We've spoken about it beforehand, more around building a community, but it's really that tangible act of listening. Sure, that might not be what they're saying to you loudly, and particularly in an Australian context where feedback isn't always that loud. It may be how they're acting or how they're responding to your product. Embrace innovation and don't assume your way of doing things now is the best and only way. Now, to put in the Apple context, year on year, Apple iterates. They improve upon the little things, and it comes from a space of continuously learning and improving. They're a market leader in this space. And as an individual, embrace new technologies. And Em, you mentioned before that you do adopt technologies when you're dragged, kicking and screaming, but I'll give you credit.
Yep.
You bought me some technologies along the way. And so there's probably a mission there to stay informed. Now, Em,
Mhm.
how does it apply to a business owner? Because for me, it's hard when you're probably working in the business. You're not really
Yeah.
able to kind of think about this. But when you all start to work on the business and move outside, this should be your focus. Think about something you're doing every day over and over again. Is there a technology that automates it or changes it or takes that off? And as a 9 to 5er, because that was the promise, both in the business and a 9 to 5er, you may be looking at new ways to do things that you're hearing something in the office that's a problem, a really annoying problem. You take a couple hours of your day to solve it. You have no idea how often a nicely constructed spreadsheet can bring a bit of order to something chaotic.
Yeah.
Worst case scenario, you've learned a skill, building a solution, and seeing if it works. That's a good skill to have. Best case scenario, people use it and you've removed an annoyance and you're a hero in the workplace. Anything on the continuous learning mindset?
I think that's really great. And I work in a really big university organization. I manage research projects and I help research departments find funding and all that kind of stuff. And a huge part of my role is just knowing what's going on in the industry, who's doing what projects, what can we get involved in, what funding's coming through for our area, what support is the university going to provide? Are there any seminars or webinars that we can attend to learn more about our area so that we can, gain momentum in terms of what we're doing? And that's a huge part of my role, to help define the strategy in terms of where we place our energies, because that's a really big part of, a 9 to 5 in a big organization. There's so much opportunity, but where do you focus your energies? Those small iterations can help you divert and pivot from something you're spending a lot of energy on that's not really worthwhile, that can be automated, and then you can look at iterating in other areas because all of a sudden your time's freed up and you have a
Correct.
knowledge about what's going on around you.
And in the era of quiet quitting, I'm not saying do more. I'm not saying work harder and go outside your hours, but there is definitely ways in which to be able to find these things to find your own efficiencies. And so there's ways to do it smartly. Takeaway two, be user centric. So, what does that mean? Whatever problem you're solving, take a moment to remember who your audience is. Is it a customer out there? Is it someone inside the team? It's why so often products don't actually work. They don't actually solve the problem that the customer or the person who's using it might actually have. Or they just kind of add more problems and they simply can't leap the gap between those innovators we mentioned beforehand and the early adopters to that early majority, the sweet spot. It's something we saw with Quibi a little bit, the essential phone, definitely, to go back through our back catalogue, and so many more things. Something as simple as making sure the menu in your cafe or restaurant is in a font that is legible or laid out in a way that makes sense. How many times have you worked with a designer and they've said, no, it looks great. I'm going to put the caption across this person's face because that's the best way to show something. And you're like, yeah, but that's not
That
really a
person
great
is speaking and we can't see
that
their
person's
face.
speaking. They've got
Yeah.
words across their face, or I can't read that. Please don't use that font. It extends to things like having a website that prioritizes giving your customers a way to find your contact details rather than something that is so pretty or fun that it loses all functionality. So think about it. What are you trying to get your customer? And
Yeah.
are you doing everything in your path to make sure that happens?
Yeah.
I feel like so many examples where people dream up scenarios where it's really complex and almost makes it easier for them, but not really for the customer. Again, if you're in a company working for someone, being user centric, that kind of starts with feedback, seeking it out or finding whether your company collects it in some fashion, obviously obeying all the privacy laws, and using that to inform decisions on how you approach your work. Then considering how you can do your job with maybe more accessibility, more inclusivity. Go out and find a way to be clear and communicate. The hard truth sometimes is not good enough that you, as an individual, get what you're talking about. Your audience, your users, and those you work with, they need to understand it. Communications, narrative, and messaging. It can really be the difference between an idea that everyone adopts to one that's left on the shelf or inside a PowerPoint deck.
100%, like focusing in on the customer is a given, but I would love to add one of the things that really struck me when you sort of talking is that Apple receives criticism around the fact that it's only got a few products and there's like they're just slightly iterating on those and they just sort of sit in this safe zone and they haven't really innovated in a while. And I think that's a really interesting thing to look at because I'm wondering where that criticism comes from and does it come from other giant companies? Because Microsoft has so many damn products and the thing where you want to write a Word document doesn't really it like that could use some help. I'd love them to iterate on Word. That'd be awesome. Please, please, Microsoft, if you are listening, iterate on Word, make it better. You know what I mean? So what I think is like Apple listens to their customer and goes, okay, we've got a product that everybody likes, but there's this issue, and we're just going to consistently make it better. And so it's always going to be the best available product on the market, which a lot of, gamers and things would disagree because they're like hardcore, Windows people. But for the customer that Apple targets, which is, everyday guy who just wants to open up their computer and do some work on it, it
Uni
really is.
students, creatives, and general workmanship. That's what the
Yeah.
devices are for.
So easy to use. It's so simple to pick up. My parents own Macs because they were just like, this makes so much sense to me in terms of the way it uses. So like don't listen to the marketing guy in the room or don't listen to the business guy who thinks they know what they're talking about. You should always be driven by what the customer is asking for. And if that you receive criticism, but you're not losing business, then the critics don't matter because you're never ever going to please everybody.
And speaking of pleasing everyone, this brings me perfectly to takeaway three. Your brand is important. Now, sure, Apple has the luxury of being named the top 10 most valuable brands for the better part of a decade, which is how they're going to push into that early adopter category. Those individuals use their intuition, they're trusting Apple's track record for quality products that solve a problem in a creative way. Hey, it may be pricey, but geez, it's beautiful. But what does that look like for you as an individual? What are the non negotiables that you want your customers to associate with your brand? Is it speed? Are you the fastest cafe out there? Is it quality? Maybe that's what you want. Is it cost? Are you something that's really cheap and affordable? Again, in an environment where you're a worker, what do you want people to know you as? Is it the individual who's incredibly responsive and really good at tech? The individual who you can get a really high quality answer from on certain issues? The thing you should do is work backwards from the thing you want to be known for and what you think that will offer you. Is that more responsibilities, promotion, getting onto a project, whatever that might be, but set in practice the things you do day in, day out to ensure that becomes your brand.
100%. And reputation matters to the customers that matter. If you're all of a sudden not living up to your reputation, and we've said in this podcast before, if that is quick, cheap, and dirty, that's fine. If that's your identity, and people know, look, this thing isn't going to last more than a year if you're lucky, but hey, this is what I wanted at the time. I don't really care. I just need something quick and cheap, which that's the brand. But if you are Apple, then your brand is more quality, and that you're getting something good that's going to last 2 years and then be redundant. But then, like, you can't be a technology company and not have a 4 or 5 year cycle is long, because there's going to be new technologies out there. Like, you can't, you have to make it roll over and stay true to your brand, so that, because your customers have an expectation, that your brand is your customer expectation. So yeah, 100%.
And what are you doing to make that, regardless of what environment you're in? So, Em, that's the Apple Vision Pro. I will be getting one, probably the second one, probably down the track.
I have no doubt. I get claustrophobic, so I just don't know if I will ever be someone that jumps on a bandwagon of there's a world in like this. It just sounds awful. I'm
You do the
claustrophobic.
glasses, though.
I'm claustrophobic and I have vertigo. So I feel like it's just really, I'm just really not ever going to be the audience. But hopefully I'm not forced into that.
I'll tell you how good it is from my virtual nirvana that I eventually get to.
Well, listeners, there you have it. You now understand a little bit more of the con, and we hope that you don't arrive on your first day at your new job and are forced into a virtual reality headset. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the Big Con podcast. It not only supports us, but means you will get all of the latest episodes straight to your device. Do not keep all the fun to yourself either. Share the con around your mother, your aunt, your best friend's brother, and tell them to check us out on all their favorite podcast apps. That's all of them, not just one. Like, go to every single podcast app.
Every single one. Yep.
For any further details, head over to our website, thebigconsultingagency.com, and sign up to the mailing list. Bye for now.
See ya.
This podcast was recorded on the lands of the Woiwurrung language group. Always was, always will be Aboriginal land.